Thank you for having us all here tonight. Thank you, Cheyenne, for that great introduction. I want to thank the Institute of Politics, and I want to thank our terrific panel for being here tonight. We're going to start off with some questions for them, some general questions, and then more specifically dive into the debates a little bit and give us a view from a top-down and also inside-out look at the debates. And I am absolutely thrilled to be here and be able to moderate. I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm just as excited as you are to get started, so let's jump in. I'm going to start first with a couple of general questions just to kind of frame our discussion. And I'm going to start with David. And David, we are about 50 years past the first presidential debates, the Kennedy-Nixon debates.
Televised.
First televised presidential debates. Times have changed in terms of communications. Do presidential debates still matter?
Oh, I think that they do. I think that, when we discussed the other night when we had this panel of strategists, our decision to front load our media and spend money that had been allotted to September and October to earlier in the race, and I said then that I thought that it was critical for a variety of reasons, but it's also true that television advertising is far less impactful after the conventions than before, in part because the presidential debates become the story. And we knew that for much of October, the presidential debates would dominate the coverage of the race. So, it is rare for them to be determinative. I think that in 2000, probably the debates were as close as that race was, and Vice President Gore had uneven performances. I think that contributed to the outcome. And we knew that these were going to be important. They certainly were the fulcrum of coverage for much of the month of October. I will tell you, though, we did a panel together in Boston, and it was on the race as a whole. And just as the moderator got to, said, now I want to talk about the Denver debate, and all of a sudden there was a blackout. And nobody ever found out why, but I suspect, I think I saw one of my colleagues with the scissors running away from the generator there just to, anyway, go ahead.
And I want to say to everybody on the panel, feel free to jump in, any questions that are asked, if you feel it's something you want to respond to as well. Beth, I want to ask you a question now specifically. You can certainly respond to what David said, but my question for you is, can a candidate win a presidential debate? And how would you define winning a presidential debate?
Yes. See Denver.
Right. She's right.
And blackout. No. Okay.
Now, that was, I don't think, and I would say that there have been a lot of instances where a presidential candidate won a debate. I think it's hard to win on issue points, but I think that you can win in a moment, like Ronald Reagan did with "There You Go Again," and I think that's tough. Or you can win with sort of a prolonged demeanor and lack of enthusiasm. I think, which was how Mitt won with the Denver debate. I went and watched the debate again, and I was struck as I was watching it a second time on the issues. I think it was pretty close. When you listen, if you just were listening to that debate, you wouldn't have said there was as decisive a winner as I think that there was. But when you watched it, it looked different.
And we'll have a chance to dive into that debate in just a couple of minutes. But I'm just picking up on something you said there in terms of defining success or failure, and you went right to kind of the optics and how something looks, as opposed to the issues themselves. Are you troubled by that, or do you think that's appropriate?
Well, maybe no, I'm not troubled by it. I think that voters take the measure of the man, and that's a very important part of the presidential election process. And President Obama rebounded nicely in debates 2 and 3, and Americans got a good look at their president, and were pretty happy. So I think it's an altogether appropriate way to look at him.
I would just point out that this is not a new development. There are all these there's all this literature written about the 1960 presidential debate between Kennedy and Nixon, and people who listened to the debate on the radio thought Nixon had won, and people who saw it on television thought Kennedy had won. The visual aspect of it is very, very important. We knew in that first debate, and I don't want to jump ahead, but that we were sitting in our locker room, and Beth was in their locker room, and what we saw, on these dial groups, what we heard in focus groups after, were much less about any substantive difference than it was about style and energy and appearance, and so that is very, very important.
Yeah, and in fact, people who had just heard the debate on the radio had a much different impression of how bad it was. So I think that alone speaks to the power of television. But it also, before Denver and the series of debates, I would have said you can only win a debate if your opponent messes something up. But I think what Beth said is right, is that you can win a debate if your opponent messes something up. You can also win a debate by a prolonged period of just doing consistently better than the other guy.
When Teddy White wrote The Making of the President in 1960 about those presidential debates, he said the chief effect of the debates was that it gave the people of a great democracy a living portrait of two people under stress. And that was really
that
the
could be
value.
said of the entire presidential race.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important part
And
of
that's
the process.
revealing,
Right.
correct? Karen, I want to, and the last question, kind of general question I wanted to ask was to you, Karen, which is, learning what you've learned and kind of doing this at the highest stakes place that you've done it, what's the hardest, most difficult challenge about preparing for a televised presidential debate? If you had to single something out as being the most challenging part about it, what is it?
Oh, so many hard things. It's very hard to choose.
I'll go beyond one. That's
among
fine.
them. Well, I think the most important thing, and then I'll work on your question of most difficult, is knowing your candidate and knowing what their strengths and weaknesses are going to be, and really listening to them when they're telling you what they believe their strengths and weaknesses are going to be. So I think, if you engage in this debate preparation, you clearly think that you are doing a good job and you view yourself as an advisor to the candidate. And I think one thing that is sometimes a challenge but is extremely important is appreciating the need to hear what they're telling you. Because the truth is, when they get up on that stage, if there is some issue that they want to talk about or some point that they want to make and they think it's really critical, it does not really matter how many times you've told them that that is perhaps not what the public wants to hear. They're going to make that point. And so your job really is in part to advise them, but also in part to work with what they're telling you is really important to them. Because particularly at this level, this is the largest audience that these candidates are ever going to speak to. So it is foremost in their mind to communicate what they want to communicate. And so I think as advisors, we view our job to give advice, but part of it is the importance of listening to what you're getting from your candidate.
Good point.
I'd say one last thing on this, on these general points. Debates are enormously important to challengers. It's when Mitt Romney stood on that stage in Denver, 70 million people were watching, and he had not had any audience to rival that. And as the challenger, he just wasn't as well known to the American people as the president. And he took great advantage of that opportunity and really kind of recalibrated the race to some degree.
It's also a moment of stature for that
No
challenge.
question
The minute you
about it.
walk on that stage, the race, the dynamic changes.
Which is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and going to your point also of the size of the audience, but also it's the first completely unfiltered. There's not a media editorial editing,
Right.
or they're not seen through the eyes of the other campaign or their own campaign. It's sort of the candidates unplugged, which is pretty profound.
But it is a great opportunity for a challenger.
Yeah.
It is a minefield for an incumbent. And if you think about the people, Beth mentioned a couple of points. Yes, Ronald Reagan in his debate with Jimmy Carter, I don't know, I think he would have won anyway, but he certainly accelerated his progress and there you go again was a piece of that. 4 years later, Walter Mondale had a little burst of energy after the first debate because Reagan underperformed. And then Reagan came back in the second debate and made a joke about his age that was completely charming and disarming, and the race basically ended. But presidential debates are never terribly advantageous for incumbents.
Okay, so the hope was with those questions we could illustrate a little bit what the stakes are in the presidential debates, what we might define success and failure, and then a little bit getting behind the scenes. And those are the three things I think we're going to deal with in the rest of our time here together. And let's start talking a little bit about the debates themselves. And I want to start a little bit where Karen had left off, which is goals. And what the goals were well before the debate cycle started, not for any particular debate, but more in general. And Beth, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
From the place you were coming from, say in the spring after you'd gotten the nomination, or maybe a little bit thereafter, if you could have drawn up what the best case scenario was for the governor after the debate series, what would that have been? What did you need to do?
It's interesting because we didn't know how or why September would be a bad month, but we suspected that we wanted to be ready to go into what we called debate season, expecting that we wanted to be alive. We thought we would be outspent. We knew we were going to be outspent before the conventions. We thought that the debates were our single best opportunity in the campaign to change the character of the race. And so we started our preparations very early. Our goal was to come, and we really liked the fact that the first debate was on the economy. We would have been very unhappy if the first debate was on foreign policy, because while I think debates are minefields for a challenger or for an incumbent president, foreign policy debates are difficult for a challenger because we just don't know all the information that the president knows about these things. And so our goal for the debates now overall was to be able to come into them from a position from behind and get enough momentum to shoot ahead.
So going all the way back into the spring, your vision of where you would be at the beginning of October was probably a little behind and
Yes.
using them as a
Springboard.
catapult to go forward.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about specific goals for each debate, one of the ways we prepped was about a week out, we started determining specific goals for each of those debates. But our overall goal was for the debates was to use them as a springboard.
Okay.
To shoot by.
All right. And on the other side, now in 2008, you actually wanted the foreign policy debate first, isn't that? Is that
We
right?
did because we felt that first of all pretty confident that that Senator Obama would perform well in those debates. He had 25 or so, maybe more debates with Hillary Clinton and others. Many of those centered on foreign policy. He felt he was on the foreign policy committee. He was comfortable with that, and we thought the economy was a strength of ours, and that we wanted to end on a strong subject. In the case that it was the election was close. So this time it was interesting to hear Beth speak, because we also wanted the first debate to be about the economy, because we thought it was a strong suit for Governor Romney, and we thought if we had a bad debate, the last debate, so close to the election, this was October 22nd, that we might not be able to recover from it. So we thought, let's deal
have
with
our
the
bad
economy
debate
first and put foreign policy second. So this was an area of
Yeah,
agreement
and-
between us.
And there was would have been a very similar phenomenon this time as what happened in 2008, is you have, ostensibly a foreign policy debate be your first debate, but the economy is what's on the minds of all the voters. And so the moderator can't help but talk mostly about the
Right.
economy. And so that's what happened in 2008, and that's what would have happened in this cycle as well. And I think everyone recognized, certainly from our point of view, that this election was about the economy in large part. And so if you had a first debate where 70 million people tune in and you don't talk about the economy, that's going to look tone deaf on everyone's part.
What happened in 2008 was that the Lehman Brothers collapse took place on September 15th, and the first debate was September 26th. So they actually made a decision, the debate commission made a decision that they were going to make the first debate half about foreign policy and half about the financial crisis. So as we went in, it became a kind of mixed debate. It wasn't even an unofficial decision.
Well, as long as we're here for a second, why don't we talk a little bit about something that's not discussed very much, which is the negotiation over debate formats, timing, and also moderators. The Presidential Commission on Debates is charged with putting together the presidential debates and the vice presidential debate, but the campaigns have a lot of input. Beth, as these negotiations took place, what was the one thing you really thought you needed to come out of there with?
Well, just to clarify, the campaigns don't have nearly as much input as I think you're thinking they do, and frankly, I think they should have a little bit more input than they do. Our negotiator was Ben Ginsberg, and we'd put together a long list of what we wanted. We wanted, we wanted the economy debate first. We wanted, we had given them a list of proposed moderators. We had talked about, do we want opening statements, closing statements, all sorts of things like that. And pretty much what happened is Bob Bauer from the Obama campaign and Ben Ginsberg showed up at the Presidential Debate Commission, and they were given a document that said, here's the way it's going to be.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
20 pages
I think
long.
we did coin tosses on a few really minor things, but most of that there wasn't a lot of negotiation.
No.
I think we
mean,
agreed
there were
that we
some-
needed more negotiation.
But there were there were more, there were points about how close the podium should be and things like that that were discussed. But the debate, I agree with Beth, the debate commission has a lot of authority, and it's something that ought to be examined.
The other thing I'd say on this is that I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about do we prefer standing or sitting, and things that in the end didn't really work out how we thought that they would work out. I mean, we certainly preferred standing debate, and then Denver comes along, and it was obviously a huge success, and then we get to the foreign policy debate, and they're seated, which was not our preference to have the President of the United States and the Commander-in-Chief seated.
We didn't want the seating
with his
either.
challenger.
We wanted to be standing all of
They wanted all of the debates to be seated.
Yeah.
Right, the
They wanted
commission
to
would have
create
been
a
happy if
kind of
everything was seated.
Charlie Rose-ish
Yeah.
situation. But
that's time we'll never get back, and it was
Right.
completely right.
But would you say, why did we want standing? We wanted standing
Yeah.
because our experience had been that the president was better in standing.
More
debates.
energetic?
Yes. But we're revisiting that theory.
And we'd had 22 debates, and we also thought Mitt was better standing. Maybe we were right, but it, not that we had a lot of say in it.
Well, let's talk about your debaters. Karen, you mentioned before it's important to understand strengths and weaknesses. So ahead of time, in your view, what were the strengths and weaknesses of Barack Obama as a debater? What was it that you were going to have to work towards and work around?
Well, one incredible strength is obviously that he is brilliant with an incredible grasp of a lot of information and the ability to communicate that information, which he does on a daily basis as president. So I think there are a lot of strengths that come from, the benefits of the years that he has spent immersed in the policy choices, and also the experience of having made those choices. I mean, he can speak firsthand about what it was like to visit with our troops or make an important decision in economic policy. I think one weakness that was identified is he is somebody who likes to explain what he's doing, and in a debate format, there's not really room for the kind of explanation that a thoughtful person would want to give all the time. And so I think that was one thing that we all recognized, that the format just doesn't present the opportunity to be very thoughtful in your explanation.
And he agreed with that as an appraisal of his own.
In theory. But I I would say that sometimes and oftentimes your strength is also your weakness.
Yeah.
Yes, he has an enormous grasp and a knowledge of a lot of things that are germane. I think this is true of every president, by the way. But you're used to imparting it in press conferences, in interviews, but not in a kind of adversarial climate where your opponent is 6 feet away and coming right at you. And so the skills that may serve you well in other kinds of communications exercises don't necessarily serve you well in the debates. I think that's a lot to do with what happened in that first debate.
Yeah.
Beth, you've been with the governor for many years as chief of staff, and before that assisting him with debates on the state level, and then you'd had all the debates in 2008, and then some 20-some primary debates. So you absolutely had a catalog of information about the governor's strengths and weaknesses. What did you think that they were, and what did he think that they were?
His strengths. Again, these guys are all pretty darn smart who play at this level. He also has an ability. I mean, I was never really worried that he would have a grasp of the policy. I took that as a given, although it took a long time to get him there because there's so much stuff, so much information to learn. And I think he's a very skilled debater. And I say that I think he honed his debating skills in the primary. We had a lot of difficult debating objectives in the primary debates. I mean, he had to diffuse situations, he had to ignite situations, and he was able to be a good adversarial debater, which I think served him well when he went on the stage one-on-one with President Obama. And you saw that skill set really in Denver. I think his weaknesses are that while he has a great command of the facts, he is not as skilled as the president is in conveying that in a personal and empathetic way. So that I was concerned in the second debate where there was a lot of interpersonal
Town hall
style debate. Where there was a lot more interpersonal skills with the questioners. The questions came from the audience. That would be challenging for him, and I think it was.
Yeah, I actually, I read recently that one of the moderators said that the town hall debate should be gotten rid of. And I actually think that we were advantaged in the town hall for two reasons. And one is the reason that Beth just mentioned. And the second is that the format itself, which only gave you either 1 or 2 minutes to speak, actually was a helpful constraint on a candidate who is more prone to long explanations if given an 8-minute block of time. So for us, I actually think having shorter blocks of time in which to give your answers was very helpful, and that is unique to the town hall format, which I thought was a nice change from the
It's a similar experience, I think, for
podium
John
debates.
Kerry when he was actually running in 2004, that the time limits actually assisted him, and he had the reputation of being a relatively windy soul as a speaker.
One of the mistakes that we made in that first debate and in the run-up to the first debate is what the debate commission really wanted was a lot of open-ended discussion. And what our observation of Governor Romney, and we always thought that he was a good, strong debater. There was no doubt in our camp. I mean, the truth is Senator McCain was not a particularly strong debater or disciplined debater, but we had watched the primary campaign. The truth is every time that Governor Romney had a significant challenge, he would show up at the next debate and he would do exactly what he needed to do. And we were aware of that. So what we thought, based on what we saw, was that he was better on the things that he was prepared for and had anticipated, and that if it became more free-form, that he might be less effective. So when they proposed this open-ended format, we said, yeah, that sounds advantageous, but for the reasons that Karen said, that was a horrific miscalculation.
Beth, what did you view as places where maybe you could make some hay with the president? David has referred to maybe where the governor might have some difficulties, but in terms of the openings, the president, as you studied his prior debates, scouted him, where were the openings, if there were any?
We felt that actually we we thought a different Barack Obama was going to come to the first debate. So we had sort of prepared Mitt to be a lot more aggressive and really engage in a lot of more skirmishes with the president on the economic policy. But we felt that Mitt could take advantage of a president who would be on the defensive a little bit on the economy. He had to defend 4 years. I don't think the American people blamed him for the economic situation he inherited, and in fact thought he had done an okay job, but he still had a lot to defend, and that's where we wanted to move in and take advantage and be aggressive on that and look forward and talk about programs. We were advantaged in that we could say, we wouldn't do it that way, we would do it this way, and the president we felt he had to be on the defensive.
And you were right. The fact is, and the reason that we always had this first debate circled in red with some trepidation, is that the history of incumbent presidents in these first debates is not good.
Because they're rusty?
Well, I think the rustiness is a piece of it. It is helpful. When we absolutely benefited from having 28, I think it was 28 debates with Hillary Clinton and the others who were all strong debaters in 2000 in the primaries, and we were, he was sort of game ready for the debates in the general. But the other thing is, and I had this discussion with Mark McKinnon, who worked for George W. Bush. They had a very bad time in the debates, and particularly the first one in 2004. And it was interesting how to compare notes, because the fact is, when you're president of the United States, nobody's gotten in your grill the way an opponent's going to get in your grill on that stage, and you also feel it's a natural thing to want to defend your record. So
So if you can goad them a little bit about their record, and that was.
And why is defending your record not a good thing in a debate? What is it that happens when a candidate is defending their record? What inevitably happens? Karen?
Well, two things happen. One is, if you're defending your record, you're not talking about your vision for the future, which is what the election is about. Voters already have had this president for 4 years. They don't need to re-vote for him 4 years ago. They need to vote for him as a leader going forward. So it's most important to talk about what's your vision for the future, how things are going to be better. And that's particularly important when there are economic or other struggles to communicate that. And the other reason it's not great to defend your record is because it can become personal or about you as opposed to about the other guy, because what you really want to do is be contrasting what you would do in the future versus what this other person might do.
About the other guy, and also about the audience,
The American people.
Right.
Right. But the basic rule is it's better to be the stick than the piñata. So.
Well, speaking of piñatas, let's talk about the president at the first debate.
I made that too easy.
Well, I think we're into the debate at this point. So I want to look at it from two places. I really want to look at the preparation and to give people a glimpse of what it is to actually prepare for a debate at this level, both substantively and also the mechanics of it. So let's start with the mechanics of it in terms of the preparation process. Karen, tell us a little bit about the entire process from soup to nuts, from the beginning, when you're first thinking about what it looks like at the beginning, all the way until the candidate walks onto that stage.
Her hands are still calloused
Yeah, I know.
from all the typing.
That would take a long
of
time.
Position papers.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this: while there's a small group of people in the room with the candidate when the actual mocks are taking place, the preparation of the materials was a much broader enterprise, at least for us. And the way that this sort of makes the most sense is to look at it as an inverted pyramid. So as an initial matter, you want to make sure that the candidate understands the policies and the issues and has all the information at his or her disposal so that it can be deployed in more strategic ways later. So the materials that we prepared, and we prepared with the help of many members of the campaign staff who would send us things that we would then edit and work on for debate purposes, we're sort of broader, more issue-based and general questions. And then as time goes on, you can hone down what you think that the questions and issues will be that come up in the debate, and think more about what the moments are going to be between the two candidates. And I think, there's sort of an easy way to think about this, the 3 P's of debate performance, which is on one hand, predict, practice, and perform. So you have to predict what the questions are going to be, what the issues are going to be, and what the other candidate is going to throw at you. And then you have to practice those things, both by understanding the issues, but also by engaging them in a way that makes sense as something that one might say in the debate. And that's something that we did towards the end of the process in the mock debates. And then perform, and that's really, there's work to be done on with the candidate about what they're going to look like on television when they deliver their one-liners and their moments. And at the end, the performance is really only on the person that gets to walk out there. But
what is it that you actually give to? You started with this universe of information. You funneled it down. What is it that you actually are giving to the president prior to the mock debates, right? So well ahead of that time, where he can begin digesting the material.
So it's a mix of policy papers, which are issue-based, strategy memos, and then a paper that's sort of more targeted to moments likely to come up in a debate. So taking the issues and really engaging them in ways that you think will come up as between the
Here's
candidates.
how it could look.
Yeah, here's how an interchange between the two of you might look. And the most important thing about this process is really what I mentioned earlier, which is that the development of the materials is a collaborative effort between the prep team and the candidate.
How big is the prep team? How many people?
Ours was quite small.
Maybe 8 or 10?
Yeah, if not fewer actually in the room. And then, we had staff that worked with us, and obviously we're supported by the campaign infrastructure.
Okay, great. And Beth, similar?
Similar process. We started when the primary ended. We had a strategy meeting and made it very clear to everybody that he wanted this. In fact, he used the terms, "I want this to be the Manhattan Project of our campaign. I don't want resources spared. I want my calendar to be full of debate prep, different types of debate prep." So we started in earnest in May, and I think that's about the time that you started.
Yeah.
And I was tasked as quarterbacking that team, but it very much was a team effort. We had a policy team that really got the issue books, just like Karen described, prepared for mid. And what we did is we gave it to him serially. So I put together a schedule, and of every week he got 3 briefings. And I always coordinated them with his schedule. So if he was going to fly from Iowa to Florida, I would make sure that his aide had it to hand to him on the plane as he got on there, so that he would use his time wisely, because as everyone knows, time is such an incredibly precious commodity. Candidate time is such a precious commodity in a campaign. We did a lot of mock debates. We did 16 total, and I think
Full run-throughs?
Full run-throughs. We did during the Democrat convention. We did debate, what we called debate camp, where we went to a remote location and did 5 mock debates in 2.5 days. And Senator Portman was our. That was a lot.
That is not.
Yeah. No, I mean,
It's great.
it worked.
Yeah, it was.
And we're ending.
really,
Cannot
really
success.
tremendous.
And those were
Yeah.
the first mock debates we did, and we learned a lot in that intense period. It was typical Romney campaign stuff. We did a morning debate, mock debate, an afternoon mock debate, and then we had a fun whiteboard dinner. The first whiteboard dinner was, let's talk about.
What's whiteboard taste like?
Yeah. we would talk about what are Obama's strengths and how's Obama going to attack Romney, and night 2 is what are Romney's strengths and how's Romney going to attack Obama. But at the end of that session, and I do think those were a critical 3 days, we We knew what we needed to do. Mitt was good on the issues. He was less good on pivoting and attacking. And we spent then the rest of our time really honing those pivots and attacks. We felt we had to be aggressive.
Between the camp and the first debate.
Yeah,
That was,
and you know, we had different types of debate prep. We had, with different numbers of people in the room, we had, when we were doing strategy sessions where we talked about, you know, here's how you do it, we only had 3 or 4 people in the room. When we had our mock debates, we had about 15 people. When we did policy discussions, we had about 8 people. But I mapped them out very specifically, different tasks for different prep sessions. And it was, you know, going back to what Karen said, knowing your candidate is critical. I mean, I'm a good debate prepper for Mitt Romney. I'm not sure I could, you know, how that would translate to another candidate, because I really understand this guy, that guy, and I understand how he learns, how he thinks, how he digests material, when he's in trouble, when he's confused, when he needs help, and I think that's probably the most important thing in prepping.
We should point out that Beth knows him from a lot of different perspectives, including having been his debate foil or partner when he ran for governor in 2002. So she actually debated Mitt Romney several times.
did that experience assist you in prepping Senator Portman to
Yeah, Rob was phenomenal. He was the hero, and you know, I'll tell the anecdote we talked about yesterday. Not only was he good at channeling President Obama, but he was, you know, as I said earlier, one of our concerns was Mitt's use of, you know, learning how to relate to the audience. And Rob was very good at demonstrating that when we were doing a mock debate for the town hall. We would build exact models, exact replicas of the space for the town hall, because learning how to use that space physically, it was really important. And, you know, how close to get to the people, how to look at them. And we were discovering that Mitt was sort of standing back a little too far. So Rob Portman, channeling the president, came up to me. I asked a question. He came close. He got closer. And then he sat on my lap. So that Mitt got the idea, like, maybe you could have a little more relationship. This is how the president is going to do this. He's going to be so close to the people. This is his incredible skill. He's going to be sitting on their lap, not literally, but and Rob was very good at delivering those cues in a humorous manner and making it easy for Mitt to digest them.
Okay, how about on the other side, the mock debates, the number, where they took place, and the prepping of Senator Kerry as the Mitt Romney doppelganger?
Well, so the first thing I want to point out is Beth's description of their process is actually very similar to our process. One distinction, though, is something that you all did that's very smart, I think, and that people should always do, which is fairly early in the process have some very serious mock debates, because it's for a diagnostic purpose. I mean, you can figure out where the problems are going to be. And we did do mocks early, but I think our full and very developed mocks were later. And I think that that's something that in the future I would recommend folks do differently. I think what Beth described is a very smart way to do it. Because there are talents that the candidate goes into the debates having, and so rather than spend your time addressing those, you want to really work on the problem areas. To your question about John Kerry, I thought was a tremendously good surrogate. We would ask him to play very different kinds of Mitt Romneys during different debate preps, and he always did each of them excellently. He also had an incredible amount of knowledge, not just about Mitt Romney, but about Governor Romney's record in Massachusetts, and so he could really bring to bear facts that no other person we could have found would have known and would have been able to embody. So he did a tremendously good job.
The other thing that he brought was very few people on the planet have actually participated in these debates.
Yes, this is true.
It came home to me when we arrived for the town hall debate, and we walked out, and all the debate commission, you know, was welcoming Senator Kerry back, and you know, and he's looking around.
And you hadn't thought about that, really, had you? As a good reason to have.
Well, we thought about it, but but as time went on, it became clear because he was not only helpful in terms of his performance, but he had helpful suggestions as well. But I think for the president, to have a guy across the stage who had been involved in those debates made him take him a little more seriously.
Was the president committed to all the preparation that you would outline?
Absolutely.
He was ready to go.
He worked very hard.
Okay, so we get to the first debate, and the debate has begun. And put us in your shoes watching the debate. Where are you? What are you seeing? What are your reactions? Are you high-fiving or
You mean during the
cringing?
part that we watched, right?
Right. Yes, exactly. Beth, you want to start off?
The campaign senior team watches the debates in rooms backstage to the side of the stage in the same building. We have several different rooms. We have a room for our surrogates. We have who are going to go on the spin floor. But the debate, the strategy team is generally sitting in a small shoebox-shaped room with a TV at the end. And we were pretty happy with the debate right from the beginning. And I was nervous that we would get unhappy. We were very happy all the way through. And felt we had a lot of opportunities in the spin room.
Karen, how about you?
We were very unhappy.
How much talking is going on as you're watching it versus just kind of the balling up and sort of the tension that can arise in that situation?
So a lot of this night is really a blur. There wasn't a ton of talking. I mean, it really was not going well from the get-go. And actually,
You thought so?
The first 10 or 12 minutes were better than the rest of it. So really, it was like a slide downhill. And one anecdote I kind of like about that night, which really drove it home for me, is we're all watching this debate, and up on the screen there's like a focus group of the debate. But there are people running the focus group, okay? And on the side of the focus group, which is showing the up and down, mostly down line, is a chat room of people, our people, saying terrible things about us. Saying things like, his debate coaches should be fired. And we looked at it, and somebody...
Life affirming.
Right, somebody standing next to me, I was like, look at these terrible things. And someone was like, yeah, those are our people. So that was a low moment.
Yeah, it was. It was pretty evident right from the beginning, and there was someone whose job it was to watch Twitter, and so that was a sobering experience. That person's going to be in therapy for years because the reaction was strong. The kind of people who were on Twitter, there were some very strong supporters of ours, and the fact is, it was our strongest supporters who were our biggest critics because they wanted him to go in and sort of body slam Mitt Romney. They wanted him to be on the offense, and they felt that he was too deferential. And I will say that from a strategic standpoint, I mean, I take some responsibility for that. We had some early mock debates where, he got engaged in ways that we thought were maybe unhelpful. And so we sort of, we're going in our own polling, we have a 6 or 7 point lead. It's much different than the summer when we were counseling a more aggressive posture. And I think we sent some mixed signals strategically. And so, it just, there's actually nothing about the prep going into the debate, nothing about our conversations before the debate, and nothing about the first minutes of the debate that made us particularly confident about it.
Beth, I want to ask you one.
Let me just add one
Sure.
thing to that is also, though, understand I think it's important to understand where the two candidates were coming from as they stepped on to that stage. Mitt we had expected to maybe not have a great September. We had a bad September, a terrible September. And with the 47% comment that came out, which was a challenge for our campaign, to put it mildly. And the president was stepping on that stage with the ability to maybe end the campaign. We were stepping on that stage with the ability to save it. And I got to think mentally that is a very important...
Without question.
Yeah.
Without question.
that these guys will perform. You perform different if your life's on the line than if it's not. And Mitt's was.
Was a tie a win that night? Was that
Well,
the view?
I think that was the assumption, and I think that's a bad way to go into a debate.
You're playing out to lose.
Right,
Yeah.
and I think that was very much what we did that night. And I will say, I said at another one of these kinds of discussions that you don't get to the finals by accident. You have to have a certain toughness and competitiveness to get there. Governor Romney's, as Beth said, his campaign would have been over if he had not performed well that night. He gave his campaign a new life that night. We didn't have that sense, By this, I don't want to jump ahead to the second debate, but I can tell you that we had a much more urgent sense about the second debate, and the president. Yeah. I mean, he did work hard for the first debate. Karen, and we may have some disagreement on this, but she described this pyramid. But I'm reminded that people are entombed in pyramids, and I think we maybe gave him too much material, and that was not helpful to him in preparing for the debates. We kind of stripped it down for the second debate, but he himself was viewing the second debate much differently than he viewed the first debate, and it made a huge difference.
I also think we probably wouldn't have had the second and third debates that we had but for Denver. So I think, the whole story of these debates really has to be looked at as a series. You can't just, they're not isolated incidents.
Did your internal polling show that he had been nicked after the debate? The public polling obviously showed that, but did the internal polling
here's
show
what our
something?
polling showed. We first of all, we were holding votes in September that really weren't our votes, okay? They were, we could hope that they would be our votes or that they wouldn't vote, but they were independent voters, leaning Republican. They were discouraged by September, and they had sort of moved away from Romney. Not that they moved so far to us. His number went down. Ours didn't particularly go up. What happened after the debate was we could see those voters coming back to Romney in the 4 days after the debate. By Sunday after the debate, we saw that level off. So where the race was at 6 points in our polling before the debate, it was back to the 3 to 4 point race that we had seen for a long time. And so in a sense, it was a correction that took place, and it was much more realistic. So the frustrating thing for us is we did see this leveling off, but there was this sense of panic among some of our supporters, and the news media is always eager to have a fight. They want a race. So they loved the storyline of Romney coming, and we had this frustrating situation where we kind of knew where we were, and we weren't in no sense did we feel at that point threatened, but we knew that if we had a second bad performance, that would test the proposition.
Okay, so
but
now
at least we lowered expectations.
Expectations were definitely lowered. So now it's time to prepare for the second debate. There's a pretty long gap between those two presidential debates, nearly 2
12
weeks.
endless days.
Right, got to fill the
12
news cycle.
glorious days.
And the vice presidential debate is in the middle there, and we'll just kind of glide over that for the time being.
Well, it's important to note that that actually was sort of a mini circuit breaker for us, because Biden went in very aggressively, and frankly, for our purposes, for our supporters who thought that Obama had done a lay down in the first debate, to have Biden come out so aggressively.
Did he provide a roadmap
helpful.
of how to answer some of the questions that had been not answered particularly aggressively the first time around?
I think that President watched that debate. I think that he obviously his style is a little different, but I think he understood, though, that he saw Biden turning questions, shoving them aside at times to make the points that he wanted to make. He saw him score at the front end of the debate, which is always important because you lose viewers along the way, and because the reporters write off the front of the debate. So if you have a good first half, you're going to influence the initial coverage of the. He saw all those things. So the Biden debate was useful. It wasn't going to, the question was still, what is the president going to do when he shows up at the next debate?
Karen, what did you think when you watched the vice president's performance?
I thought it was great. I thought he did a great job.
You weren't worried about any atmospherics or anything, the kind of the...
I mean, my view was that the vice president decisively won that debate. I thought he did a great job.
Beth, you agree with that completely?
I mean,
no doubt.
No.
Right.
I thought that Biden, I thought he did it when he performed incredibly well. I couldn't believe that he allowed himself to go out there and act the way he did, but he totally did what you needed him to do for his base. And so even though I thought he looked clownish at times, I was like, gosh, that guy is really going to the mat for the presidency.
Clownish and got the job done. Just going to note that.
But
I would say joyful.
yeah. And so I wondered at times if he went a little too far, but he didn't. And he knew, so he clearly knew, I think he pushed it to the line.
Yeah.
We had done a lot of mock debates with that kind of Joe Biden, but maybe not quite that much. But he did, he did what he needed to do. It was an impressive performance.
Yeah,
we did mock debates with Joe Biden, but maybe not that quite that much also.
I mean, I also thought Congressman Ryan did a great job in that debate.
Yeah.
I thought they both performed excellently. I'll also tell you the vice president really worked hard on his preparation. I mean, I really think there's no substitute for hard work. And even when you're somebody like Joe Biden, who's been in public life for a very long time and debated before, I mean, he worked for it.
Yeah. One of the reasons there were a lot of reasons why Barack Obama chose Joe Biden to be the vice president, but one of the things he felt strongly about was that he wanted somebody who understood what a national race was like. He didn't want someone for whom all of this would be new, and he knew that the vice presidential debate was going to be this is apart from the very experienced, had strengths that we needed and so on the governmental side, but on the political side, he had been through like a dozen debates with Biden before Biden dropped out of the race, and was really impressed by the way he handled himself in those debates.
Hey, Biden had to do the Sarah Palin debate in race number 1, which was a difficult task, and he had to do this particular performance in this debate, which was another equally difficult but very different political performance.
Yeah.
And so I thought he did. Both were challenges that a skilled, showed his skill as a politician.
Yeah.
I too thought Paul did a really great job.
Yeah, he did.
I want to draw your attention to the town hall, and in particular, we've talked a little bit about coaching for the atmospherics of using space, and that is a challenging thing for candidates to do sometimes. At least in the estimation of many, this debate in some respects came down to one particular exchange, which was the exchange over Benghazi. And it had come up in the vice presidential debate. It was really the first time that it had come up in a meaningful way, and then it came up in the town hall debate. And on the one side, beforehand, there had been arguments that there had been problems in Benghazi ahead of time with security and during the attacks, and then how it was characterized afterwards with some shifting characterizations. On the other side was the claim that the governor had gotten involved too quickly and had politicized the issue. About an hour into the debate, the question comes up. And there's an exchange that has many different layers to it. But in sum and substance, during that exchange, the governor makes a point of saying that the president had flown to Las Vegas for a fundraiser the day after, that there had been shifting characterizations. And the president comes back and says, no, I actually called it an act of terror in the Rose Garden the day after the attack, day after September 11th. What happened in that exchange? And at some point, Candy Crowley got involved, and how do you think that exchange affected that debate and the race as a whole?
Do you want to start?
No, you can.
Okay. That was one one exchange. I think there were a couple points to that. I was sort of upset with myself because I think we should have briefed Mitt a little bit better on exactly what the president said. He was not aware of the president's exact statements, but he went to the sentiment of certainly the White House was not putting forward as the primary reason for the Benghazi attack the terrorist, although I grant what he said in the Rose Garden. And I feel like we should have briefed Mitt better on that. But I do feel that Candy Crowley's interjection into that debate was sort of a pivotal moment, not just in that debate, but in presidential debating, and that it was inappropriate, and I hope it doesn't happen again. That's a good place to start the conversation.
The most predictable thing going into that debate was that, and understand, the way you approach debates is you want to predict as much, as Karen said, predict as much as possible what's going to happen. It was 100% certain in our view that this was going to happen, that there would be an exchange. We had a good sense of what that exchange would be, and the president was prepared for that.
How many times had he practiced that answer that he gave, if you can estimate? And with whom?
Well, we had mock debates. It came up in all these mock debates, and
Off to the side also during times. I mean, that's an absolutely crucial question that has to be answered at that point in the cycle.
Well, the most notable thing about this exchange from a prep point of view is we had the exact opposite experience of what Beth is talking about, which is that this phrase, act of terror versus terrorist attack, actually did come up in our prep. And so that's, I mean, you recognize here part of the importance of the candidate having the precise facts at their hand, because something real can hinge on it. So that actual phrase and the discussion of why it's...
Were you confident using the term act of terror in a way that characterized it as a terrorist
To be clear,
attack?
we didn't know that that would be the pivotal moment, but that was something that came up in our prep and was a fact that he knew that he had said act of terror in the Rose Garden, and so he was able to deploy that during the debate. I mean, we couldn't have known that that would be the phrase that it hinged on, but we knew that there would be some moment, so we knew to talk about what had happened in Benghazi. I also will say that my recollection is we prepped, there was a question by one of the town hall questioners, and then Candy asked a follow-up, and we prepped Candy's precise follow-up.
but not her interjection.
Right, we did not prep her interjection.
What did you think of the interjection?
I thought that it was unusual for a moderator to sort of become a referee on facts in the debate. I also, and there's no doubt that it was impactful, but I think the whole exchange was impactful. And you know, the one thing that was absolutely genuine on the president's part, and it did come up in the mock, when Kerry pressed him on Benghazi and intimated that that the administration had played politics on Benghazi, he was genuinely angry about it, and he was genuinely offended by it. And so what he expressed on that stage is what he expressed. He wasn't scripted to say it, but we knew
about greeting the coffins when they come back to the...
You know, I mean, that is one thing that a president of the United States brings to that stage, which is a fundamental sense of responsibility for those people who he sends into harm's way. And I know, having been with him over the years and over 2 years in the White House, that the single hardest part of that job is greeting families after you know, horrific events like that. And so, and I genuinely don't feel he felt, I know, and I'm stipulating this, we shouldn't even debate it because, you know, you either accept it or not. Never once in our campaign, never was there a discussion of, let's keep the Benghazi thing on the down low because it could be damaging. We just never had that discussion. So there's no doubt that there a bunch of stuff went wrong that that needs to be addressed. That's a legitimate issue. But he was personally offended by the notion that he would somehow countenance or sanction, you know, what amounts to a cover-up, or that he would play politics with that issue. So, yes, it did come up in the mocks, and every time it came up, he was outraged by it, and we knew that when it came up, if it came up in the way that we anticipated, that he would express that.
Yeah,
Beth,
and if you go back
sorry,
and look
Karen.
at that interchange, it's an incredibly human interaction.
And between both of them,
Between both of
actually.
them, yes. And for the reasons that David's saying, obviously the president's feeling of responsibility and outrage at like the accusation of playing politics, but also as an exchange between two men who are having a disagreement over something
In
that
close
each
personal
believes,
space.
who are very close together. I mean, if you watch it, it's actually a great debate moment, and because it's extremely human and very personal.
Beth?
And I think it was, it did not have to be a bad moment for us, because I do believe that we had, that it was an honest moment for both of them, and that they were both expressing reasonable points of view, and like I said, the part that bothered me is we probably didn't prepare for that moment as well as you did.
How do you match the moral high ground that a president can and genuinely can go to in that moment? I mean,
It's tough, and that's why I said we had a point to make, and I think it was a legitimate point. I don't think Mitt overplayed it until he pushed back on something that he did not have the correct fact for, and so that is not, he went into that debate not knowing that, and that was a debate prep mistake, and I felt very bad about it. But again, I think it was exacerbated by the moderator stepping in, and we had never ever mocked out a moderator stepping in on the facts like that in the middle of a back and forth, and that's something I suspect future debate preppers will do.
well, at this point, we certainly have the third debate we could cover, but I also want to make sure we can get to some questions.
I have a question for Beth. Before that third debate, it seemed, and during the third debate, it seemed that Governor Romney was adopting a strategy of not being scary on foreign policy to the American people, because he seemed to go out of his way to say, yes, I agree with the president. I agree with the president. I agree with the president's position on foreign policy. And it seemed like he was trying to be the anti-George W. Bush and the anti-neocon. I'm wondering, was that a deliberate strategy on your part?
It was a strategy. It was not to not be George Bush or not to be a neocon, but it absolutely was our strategy not to go in there being super aggressive on foreign policy. Like I said in the beginning, one of our assessments was it was difficult for a challenger to challenge the President of the United States on foreign policy, and we wanted to go in there. We wanted to. We saw a lot of opportunities for him to take the moral high ground on some of these issues. What we wanted to do, our goal in that debate was to look like a commander-in-chief and sound like a commander-in-chief. We did not feel we could, that we wanted to score the points on that rather than issue points on we were the tougher guy in foreign policy. We felt we had that already, and what we needed to demonstrate was commander-in-chief, calm, cool, and stature.
Can I ask a different question?
Sure.
About the first debate? I'll tell you, one of the things that I think threw the president off and was a little unsettling was the governor's first answer when the president talked about the $5 trillion tax cut, and the governor said, I don't have a $5 trillion tax cut. How you obviously knew we were going to raise that issue. And he seemed very well prepared, that like he'd practiced that answer. And there were several other places where he seemed to walk back or take a slightly different cut on things. Was that the product of prep? I mean, did his answer get refined over time?
I think you guys always said it was one thing. We never said it was a $5 trillion tax cut. So I think his answer, he felt that he wanted to use that opportunity to clarify what he didn't agree with that description of his position, and he used that first answer to do that.
How much did Portman is a legendary prepper?
Yeah.
How much did his answers help you refine?
Oh, enormously. I mean, not so much on policy, but Rob was very prescient and in understanding where the president would go, and particularly on the economics in the first debate. And we spent a lot more time prepping for that debate because we had all the time running up to it also. So Rob is so familiar with the inner workings of the budget office and of DC that he understood, he went places that the administration would go that we didn't intuitively understand. And he'd been in the White House with George Bush or George Bush's, and I really can't overestimate or overexplain how helpful he was to us in guiding our responses. Particularly, as I said, after debate camp, Mitt understood his policy. We never really had to tweak that, but we needed to tweak his. We needed to work with him on how to pivot to the offense, and that's where Rob was really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
you can't overestimate how important a good debating partner is.
Yeah. Oh, there's no question about it.
You got to pick that wisely.
Oh, here.
Wow, there's the
All right,
line.
here comes the conga.
I thought
Here
everyone
comes
was
the conga
leaving,
line of debate
but I guess
questions.
not.
All right, go ahead there, sir.
I wanted to get back to the conversation that was beginning a bit about fact-checking in relation to moderation in debates, because I think fact-checking became a very important and controversial part of this campaign, particularly with the high-level exchanges over campaigns being dictated by fact-checkers or by facts, and then through the plethora of websites that sprung up and the different news sources around that. Yeah. So the question for me is, I think what Candy Crowley did was definitely, innovative and new, and and some sides, were disappointed and some were excited by it, and particularly in this day and age where you don't really get a moderated view of a candidate and a fact checker that is not from a biased media outlet or a position that is not proposed by their opponent. Is there a better venue for real fact checking than in a moderated debate? If so, is there a future for having a more active moderator in calling out the facts and lies or mistruths of candidates than a debate?
I mean, the fact of the matter is that I thought that the fact-checking process was a little off-kilter during the whole campaign. I mean, there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into fact-checking. It's not as if there is a clear answer on every question, and a lot of it has to do with interpretation. So you're giving the moderator, it's one thing, if in a question moderator quotes something, but to have spontaneous fact-checking is giving the moderator an awful lot of leeway to, answer in what may be a subjective way. So I understand their frustration with it, and but I have a larger concern about the fact-checking generally because it was wildly variant. I mean, there were fact-checkers who, with great authority, came to absolutely different conclusions about the same set of facts. So who's fact-checking the fact-checkers?
And that might be the best reason to not do it in the course of the debate. As somebody said early on, this is like the candidates unplugged, and it's their opportunity to talk about their positions on issues and to challenge each other. And it is the only time when there's not the interruption of the fact-check machine that exists in the media during the rest of the campaign.
Yeah, Candy Crowley has had plenty of opportunities to express whatever she wanted to express on CNN. that was the debates are between the candidates and specifically not for the moderators. I mean, that was my, even if what she had done had helped Mitt and hurt the president, I would have felt the same. I thought it was wildly inappropriate.
Thank you.
This goes to both Beth and Dave. How would you describe the post-debate strategy in trying to sort of shape the analysis of the debate? You know, going to the spin room. I'm sure after Denver, that probably was not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, that was the longest walk ever into the so-called spin room after that debate. And you know, we would strategize before at the end of every debate. We were a little late in getting out there at on this one because it took a while to talk about how we wanted to. And you know, what we wanted to do was focus on what we saw were changes in position on Governor Romney's part and play offense rather than defense in the spin room. But it's incredibly important to control the environment. Debates are often won or lost, not that night, but in the aftermath of the debates. And it's really important to try and control that discussion. And the biggest mistake that I made that night was someone from MSNBC came up to me and said, you know, you're getting killed on MSNBC. Why don't you come on and say something, you know, for your guy? And I frankly wanted to get out of the spin room. I had one other thing, interview I had to do, and I will always regret that because I didn't know that, you know, Chris Matthews was going apoplectic.
When you've lost Chris Matthews.
On the air. And, you know, there were a few people like him who were sympathetic to the president, Chris, Andrew Sullivan. I'd say by the same token, but not nearly in as extreme a way because the outcome of the debate wasn't as extreme. I would venture to say that there were probably folks on Beth's side who were unhappy with the last debate because the hard partisans really want to see you take the other guy on. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think that was a mistake. I mean, you know, it was also hard to spin. One other thing I want to say about that first debate is that we talked to the president and counseled him on the fact that he would be on camera all the time. But, you know, the entire debate was in split screen. And so one lesson he learned going back and watching that tape is that it's a 90-minute exercise. And you've got, it's 90, right? 90-minute exercise. And you have to, you have to treat every second, you have to be working it every single second. And so for the second debate, we spent an awful lot of time on how he would look on camera, how, you know, when should he get up when Governor Romney was speaking, and when should he, where he should be on the stage, and none of this is anything that he likes. I mean, this is what the president dislikes about the whole process, the theatricality of it.
But so critically important.
It is. It is.
And actually, one thing that I want to say, because we would be remiss to not say it in a discussion of this first debate, and goes back to your question of what's the most difficult thing. It's reacting to things that are bad and unexpected in the process when you don't have a lot of time. And one thing that I found remarkable about this whole process is that after we had this debacle in Denver, as I affectionately think of it, there were no recriminations on anyone's part. We had such a collegial group of people working together from the president on down. It was, okay, that was terrible. How are we going to make the next one better? And so it was working on the things that David talked about and other things and targeting what we need to do better. But nobody said a negative thing about anybody else. Nobody recriminated. And I think, you know, that to me was one of the hallmark experiences of this whole
And by the way, if
campaign.
they had, it would have leaked and it would have been a terrible story. I mean, those things are impossible to keep contained.
And I should point out, the president himself was calling members of the debate team to buck them up after the debate, and took a lot more responsibility, frankly, than he deserved to take, because he wanted the team to hang together and keep working, moving forward. So that is an essential point. But I didn't know it was the debacle in Denver. I always called it the catastrophe in Colorado.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you.
Now I know it's an official event because one of our great questioners.
Now I feel pressured. Probably like Governor Romney stepping into the second debate.
That's right.
So following up on the last question, and I would like to ask about the media's portrayal of debates and possibly also get the moderator's take on this from an analyst / journalist standpoint. From my naive perspective, I would think debates provide this unique platform that is higher and more substantial from a policy standpoint compared with campaign ads or stump speeches. On the other hand, if we look back at like notable debate moments from Nixon's beard to Joe Biden's smile, there seems to be a little bit too much. Is there too much media attention on the visuals or the sound bites that dilutes the actual substantial conversation? Is it just a natural reaction of the media towards the public sentiment? And from the campaign strategy standpoint, how much shift or focus is on the visuals side and the theatric side, and how much on the substance side, and is there a percentage to it? And in an ideal world, are there any modifications that could be made on both sides to better facilitate the democratic process? Thank you.
I'll take a first crack. There are a lot of questions in there, Y squared.
That's her gift.
Look, the one thing, David talked about the spin room, but there's a whole, I'll call it a cottage industry in campaigns of how we affect the media take on it. If you are a person in the media, you are the recipient on debate night of thousands of missives from each campaign, hundreds. Yeah. Every single response, every single sentence of the other side and your side are parsed and either criticized or praised and sent out to the press in order to help them understand what's going on from your point of view. And so there's that is what campaigns do. They do it before the debate, during the debate, and for about a day and a half afterwards. And it's very intense, and it requires the entire communications team, and it's something probably normal citizens don't really understand is happening, but you really have to be skilled. I don't do that. I don't know if you do that. That's not my area, but it goes on. As far as the emphasis on appearance, that's just a fact of life. People make judgments all the time on the way things look, the way they observe them, the way they feel about them, rather than the policy and the ideas. And I don't think we could change human nature if we tried on that. Is there another specific question that I didn't touch on there?
Let me just add a couple of things to that. This is the aspect that the president was most sort of cynical about and resistant to until that first debate reminded him what the demands of the process are. But if you, I don't know if I said it here or in a previous session today, if you view the presidential campaign as a long test, an audition for the job, part of it is is how you project strength, how you project, command, and that's part of the debate process. In the first debate, the president looked particularly strong. He was doing what you suggest, which is he came, he thought they were going to have a discussion on issues. And he treated it that way. He came to have a discussion. There's a big performance element. There's a real performance element to debates. And you may not like it, you may disdain it, but that's the way it is, and that's the way it's going to be. The other point I wanted to make is that one facet of this that wasn't at all dominant last time is Twitter. And so the debate starts getting framed from almost the first minute, because the cognoscenti are like tweeting, 3 minutes in, president's in trouble,
And then thousands and thousands and thousands of people get that.
Yes.
And then their friends get that. It's a very
Well, and one thing after the first debate is we were much better organized to engage in the Twitter war because we didn't want the thing to get out of balance and out of whack. So we had people who were just focused on that. But so, you know, I understand the essence of your question, and I appreciate where it comes from because these are two people who are auditioning for arguably the most important job there is, and there are weighty issues to be discussed.
And both of them are kind of wonky. They would probably, left to their own devices, be very happy to sit down in a very boring setting and have a debate on the issues.
Yeah, but that's not how these things
That
get
ain't
scored.
the way it
And
works.
in many senses, it's not even really a conversation between two people. And I think that that's a really important realization. First of all, people are watching television, so this is TV. They just want to see a TV show. So everything that happened before and after in the campaign, I mean, it doesn't really matter. They want to see the candidates perform like a TV show. And the second thing that's important to realize is that, you know, the first guy gives his answer and then you give your answer. And it almost doesn't matter what the person before you says because you're now communicating with the people and they're watching you on TV. So to treat it like it's a conversation is to misapprehend what this exercise is all about. They're asserting their position, and then you're asserting your position. And occasionally you engage, but it is not a conversation.
And I'll just add, and I would not speak for the media. I mean, when I analyze these, I do it as somebody who studies persuasion, who teaches persuasion, who has coached many people for debates. And my take on it is that part of your job as a candidate in these settings is to project authority and humanity, to be strong and to be warm. And the reason that that's important is because that's what we like about people. That's what we want in the people who have leadership positions. And so I think the positions on issues are vital, they're very important, but I don't really think there's anything impure about making judgments about, you know, the people who are going to hold the highest office based on whether we think they're up to the job and also people we actually want in our living rooms for 4 or 8 years. I think that's an important set of considerations. You know, when it comes at the expense of actual policy knowledge, that's a problem. The flip side I'll also say is, having coached some people who are like this, I think very nerdy or wonky people actually are very compelling sometimes in their own particular way. They have their own set of integrity that they communicate to people in a variety of verbal and nonverbal ways. And so I think to the extent that that gets over on people, it's something that should be seized upon, and people should be themselves in these debates. And if that comes through, all the better. I think it's a good thing.
David, you had mentioned that at the time of the first debate, nobody had really gotten up in President Obama's grill.
Nobody had, yes.
To what extent does the office of the presidency insulate the man of the president, and how does that affect their campaigning?
Well, I think it's a really good question. The presidency is a unique office. I mean, I feel it, like I've known the president for over 20 years. We've been friends for a long time. But once you are invested with that office, you know, you're Mr. President. And, you know, while I think fairly candid with him, you know, it's hard for people to get in his grill. There is this sort of barrier to that, and he's more inviting of it than most. But I think that there are challenges associated with the presidency in that regard, which is why presidents often don't do well in these first debates. You know, and again, it was something we were aware of. It was something we talked about. It was something that he acknowledged. But it took getting hit on the side of the head by a 2x4 to really absorb the essence of the message.
Good evening. Quick question. It's no secret that throughout the campaign, Mitt Romney struggled to reach minority voters.
Hang on one second. I don't know what's going on here. I think
The panel has to
I think
leave.
the ship is about to launch.
Kind of sounds like it. My question to, I guess, all the panel, I'd like to hear from both sides. Do you
I
think...
didn't hear the first. I didn't.
Okay, let me, you know, I'm so short. Let me
Pull the mic down.
There you go. My question is, this is what I'm trying to say, that Mitt Romney throughout the campaign struggled to reach minority voters. He kind of had a disconnect with them. Do you think he could have said or done anything in any of those debates to kind of reach us and pull us back? Because he pretty much lost us. So the question is, do you think Mitt Romney could have said anything in all of those debates to kind of sway minority voters?
When you think about audiences in the debates and an audience of minorities, is there anything that the governor could have said more specifically to them?
I think his message of on jobs and opportunity was focused not at any one segment of the population, but targeted for everybody, and it's very difficult in that situation to say I'm going to give an answer targeted at one group. He's talking to all Americans. Now he did in the middle of this. Was it before the debate started? We did Univision, and that was a debate that Univision put on to address issues that were of particular interest to the Hispanic community, and we did that debate. It's unfortunate that debate didn't get more widespread coverage. That would be a good thing.
He was excellent.
For you.
There. Yeah.
I thought he did great.
He did.
I thought, in fact, I'll tell you
In
something.
the middle of the
That was another question I wanted to ask you. He got so much better in his interviews over the course of the month, and he was very strong at the end of the month.
Which month are we talking about?
We're talking about September leading into the, and I attributed that to the debate prep that you were doing, but maybe I'm wrong. But I tell you what, I watched the town hall Univision thing, which actually wasn't a debate so much as sequential appearances by the candidates, and I thought that it was the best that I had seen him, and it made me worried, and obviously for good reason.
Look, Mitt always does well when his back's against the wall. The Univision came right after the 47%. Yeah. It was his first big public appearance after that. And he went out and did what he had to do, and that's really, that's the takeaway that that I had from that, is this guy has the long ball in him, and he can do that in the first debate.
But let me answer your question by saying the honest, pragmatic answer is candidates are up there trying to talk to the voters who they feel are available and persuadable to them. And I'm not trying to put words in her mouth or get inside her head or the head of their debate camp, but we were getting 90-something% of African American voters, and we were doing very well among Hispanics, so that they were more in contention. And they weren't really the swing in the election. They weren't the folks who were going to decide the election. A little less true of the Latino community in some of those key states. And I have no doubt that his message was not, it did not, leave out minority voters. But my guess is that when they did their debate prep, that was not the top goal.
I think you were getting 99% of the African American vote. We were sure you were going to find the one remaining person, and send one of your field teams to their house.
Yeah, that was a flaw in our system.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. One thing also I wanted to say in debate prep that I don't know. We found, since we have a great moderator here tonight.
Well, that's nice. Thank you.
In debate prep.
Who doesn't interject inappropriately.
No, he did it. He did it.
Give it time.
We had. I asked one of my colleagues, Peter Flaherty, to be the. Rob was the stand-in for the president, but I asked Peter to be the moderator. And actually, that was an incredibly tough job in debate prep. And some of the people who had done debate prep for Governor Bush, who are also participating in our debate prep, commented on what an important role that actually was in the prep. And Peter spent an enormous amount of time practicing. He's a former prosecutor, and he brought a dimension to our debate preps that was quite important. And like I said, though, he never interjected in a way on facts, which was something we probably should have been prepared for.
I think that
Any last thoughts? Why don't we go around to any last thoughts?
I think mine. I don't think anybody would say that the debate process, primary and general, is optimal, or that it's really well thought through in all cases, or that it is calculated to yield the best result for the public. And I'm not denigrating the efforts of people who try and plan these things, but I do think that I'd love to see a process of really evaluating these things and thinking them through, and asking some hard questions about, how do you get the most natural kind of exchange, understanding that there is a performance element to this. How do you have a moderator who is helpful in terms of eliciting answers, but doesn't become a part of the debate? In the case of these primary debates, the Republican Party, I thought, suffered, and Governor Romney in particular suffered for having so many of them. Because it's an intramural battle. You're fending off people who tend to be more strident, and you pay a real cost for those events.
Karen?
I mean, I agree with what David said. I mean, I think part of the problem with the way debates are perceived is that there's this image of what a presidential debate is going to be, and that it's this high-minded, thoughtful discussion between two very smart people who both want the highest office in the land. And the reality is a mismatch of that. I mean, there's some of that, but there's also, it is, in the primaries, it's one particular format. In the general, it's a different format. I mean, it's a particular format and a particular exercise. And so the candidates want to bring to it this very high-minded sort of view, and that's admirable. But at the end of the day, it is really mastery over a certain exercise. And I think there's something to be gained to see how the candidates perform through that exercise, but it does not ever match up with the sort of utopian vision of what debates are supposed to be.
It's rarely a pure test of ideas.
That's right.
It's a measure of the person.
Right.
American people are looking and saying, do we want this person to lead us, and not just their answers on the issues, but the whole. It's a whole person thing.
Yeah.
And I think that people who want it to be this utopian thing are going to be very disappointed. But I think people who want to look at it in the way that Beth just articulated, those people will get the answers that they're looking for by watching the debates.
Beth, last word.
I agree particularly. I think that we all need to remember this is an important part of the process, and again, putting the emphasis on even though it's not perfect, it's unfiltered, it's close to giving the voters an intimate glimpse of who is going to lead the country and guide the dialogue between the people and their leadership for the next 4 years. I think the primary process has really gone astray. It's almost like a reality television show, and something. There's got to be a better way to do it than what's going on, and conversations like this about with the two teams about how we can present our ideas, our candidates, our platforms to the American people in as many ways and as clearly as possible, I think are incredibly fruitful.
Before we go, let me say I really appreciate you being here, Karen. Jason, you did a great job here. But I want to say a special word of thanks to Beth, because this is her 4th event of the week. She did
I've enjoyed every one
panel
of them.
on Tuesday and a couple of study groups. I know she's made herself available to students on campus. She's our first visiting fellow at the Institute of Politics, and I can't imagine having a better one. So I just really want to thank you for being so generous with us.
And thank you. And I want to say I wasn't sure what being a visiting fellow here was about, and some of my friends.
We weren't either.
Yeah, some of my friends said, "You're going out to be a visiting fellow with who?" And I could not have been more impressed with this institution. And with every single person I met, I see Darren and Amin and my hosts and of course David. Thank you so much. And I just wish all the best for this institution. It is University of Chicago is lucky to have someone like you who's willing to put the time into it and who had the vision to get it off the ground. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor.
Thank you all for being here. Thank our panel.